welcome everyone. We're just so delighted to have Professor Keith Mayerson with us today and have a partnership with the Roski School of Fine Arts. And this is one of our very first artistic kinds of Zoom sessions that we're doing through the USC Emeriti Center. And as I was explaining before, we are totally intergenerational, interdisciplinary, multicultural. We are very inclusive. And so whenever we do events like this, we invite the community as well as our faculty, staff, students, retirees, and alumni. So now I would like to introduce Jean Lee from the Roski School of Fine Arts.
Hi everyone, my name is Jean. I'm the Special Project Manager at the Roski School of Art and Design. Thank you so much for joining us today. Over the summer, Dean Haven Linkirk and Jeanette met, and we were trying to think of creative ways to partner and do something before the fall semester started. So we reached out to Professor Keith Mayerson, who is our chair of 2D art, and he teaches painting and comics, and he's just been so wonderful on Zoom this past year and a half doing presentations with our students. And he also did the circle painting demo for reunion weekend in November of last year. So we wanted to do it again and just have a broader reach of people who can participate. And thank you so much, Keith, for taking time to do this. And I will pass it off to you.
Great. Hey, everyone. Wonderful to meet you. It's such an honor and a privilege to be able to be here with you this morning. I'm so excited and thrilled. And it's a great way for me as an icebreaker to start my new semester and start the school year. We're so happy we're going to be in person this year, albeit with masks, but we'll all be in the classroom. And so this might be one of the last Zoom demos I'll be doing for a while. Let me share my screen because I think I want to get you guys started right away. And the neat thing about this exercise is that it's super, super easy. You don't need any talent whatsoever to make a really exciting drawing in the manner that I'm going to show you. And in fact, I use this for my fundamentals of drawing class. And before I was at USC, I was in New York for 25 years. I taught at NYU and all the great schools, Columbia and Brown and Yale and so on. I also taught comics for 25 years at the School of Visual Arts. But this was a particular exercise that I love to do, sort of a quick dive into color theory in a fun way that everybody can understand and enjoy. But while I'm getting started with the introductions, I want you guys to be able to set up your space. I always think like when you're painting, it's a little bit like being in a really well-designed car where you want to have everything in front of you that you need. And so your control panel, you know, everything that you would have in a car is right there at your bidding. And so if you have watercolors today, please put them out, get a glass of water and your brushes. But truly for this, you could use anything. You use colored pencils, you could use whatever utensils you have from Staples, anything and everything that you wish to draw with, go ahead and put it in front of you so you see everything. And I always like to set my palette where I have all my colors in a row, kind of like the Crayola crayon box. If you're watercoloring today, one thing I like to do is put I use hot press watercolor paper, which is the smooth surface, but any kind of watercolor paper you have is fine. If you're using watercolors, you might want to tape it down to your desk or your surface that you're working on. That way, when you have a lot of water on it, it won't bevel and it will keep it flat. And so I'm going to switch screens now, but I want you guys to be able to get ready to go, get all your colors, get everything that you need right in front of you. And I'll give you a couple of moments to do that. And I'll show you what we're going to be doing today. So again, my name is Professor Keith Mayerson. I'm the chair of painting, drawing, and printmaking here at USC. This is going to be my 5th year at USC coming up. I'm so excited. I was so proud to be here. As I mentioned, I've taught for 30 years at all the great schools, but truly USC is my favorite school I've ever taught at. The students are the best, they're the smartest, they have the most integrity, they're the sweetest, and their ascension curves are like this. They work so hard. It's excellent, excellent, excellent. And I've been spending my summer working very hard for a show at my new gallery, Karma, in New York City. I put my artist page on the chat so you can check out what I'm doing. I'm having a show opening up on November 16th in New York. And so I have 11 paintings I just shipped off, finishing painting number 12 currently. I have 12 more to go. And so it's going to be a fun balancing act. But, you know, I always think that painting is a meditation. I always think that if you think about all the issues that you have, you know, in your mind, and you have an image that you're using that could be talismanic to all the ideas that you have in your mind, whenever you're making a painting, you're solving the problems in your head that might be in your everyday world, but you're also solving the problems kind of like a puzzle, putting all the pieces together in your image. And then afterwards, hopefully you feel a little bit better. Not all art's therapy, but I think everybody's trying to get something out. And you're also making something that's very meaningful to you. And hopefully if it's meaningful to you, it'll be meaningful to other people too. My website's currently under construction. I'm having a great design firm. The neat thing about being an artist is you get to trade for art, creating it, but that should be up September 1st. But as I mentioned, you can see my artist page at the Karma Gallery website, and that's in the chat. And this is a circle painting. This is a classic, wonderful idea of that's been around since human beings created art. This is a famous minimalist artist named Kenneth Nolan, who became famous by doing circle paintings. And this is the reason I teach this is to teach simple ideas of color theory. Most of our students are amazing. As you guys know, it's very hard to get into USC, and our Roski students are excellent. And most of them have had a little bit of color theory before. And so, you know, we always need to teach to everybody. But this is a quick dive into just the general idea, and using the color wheel as an example of this. As most of you guys probably know, the primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. And the primary colors cannot be mixed from any other combination of colors. In the color wheel, kind of like a peace symbol, we put them on the, and sometimes I actually have students make a color wheel. You don't have to do this morning because we have very little time, to reference for this circle painting. So we put the yellow here, the blue, and the red. Most of you guys probably know that secondary colors are achieved by mixing one primary color with another in equal amounts. And so yellow and red make orange, red and blue make purple, blue and yellow make green. And then the tertiary colors are created by mixing a primary color with the adjacent secondary color. So example, yellow mixed with orange is yellow-orange. This is important for this exercise, that colors are directly opposite each other on the color wheel are known as complementary colors. And when you place these colors side by side in a painting, they create the strongest amount of contrast. So I come from comics. I grew up in Denver, where at that time in the 70s, the museums weren't so great. So really I learned everything from art from comics and gag cartoons from the New Yorker and so on. And I think the neat thing about comics, and we're starting a narrative art program at USC, actually. I used to teach comics as well as fine art in New York, and now I get to do the same thing under the same roof for the first time. But the neat thing about comics is that they're generally about bringing up good ideas aesthetically with good arguments. Why are elephants big, gray, and wrinkled? This is a stupid dad joke, but they're big, gray, and wrinkled because if they were small, smooth, and white, they'd be aspirin. Why is this funny? If this is funny, it's not that funny. But elephants and aspirin don't go together. So you put those two ideas together and all of a sudden it creates a fissure, something that's kind of funny. And usually when you're making a gag cartoon, you have to think about the 60-40, 70-30 relationships, kind of like the rule of thirds of arguments between the aesthetic way that you're creating your composition that brings out that thesis statement of, let's say, elephants versus aspirin. Even if you're doing an abstract painting though, you still have to create really good dynamic arguments that are fun to look at, like any good art, that compels you to think about what you're looking while you're meditating on a subject. And so if you have red and green together, those are complementary colors and they clash, they argue with one another. If you have 50-50 arguments, maybe it's not so interesting because it's so even-sided. But if you think about the rule of thirds, again, I conflated with the golden ratio, 60, 40, 73 relationships. If you have 60% of green and 40% of red, maybe that's an interesting visual argument. Colors are side by side to each other in color wheel, create color harmony known as analogous colors. These color hues are very close, and together they create smooth and calming combinations, right? And so if you look at any of these, you know, around the wheel together, they look really nice. Maybe when you dress in the morning, you think about the analogous colors in which you're dressing, right? So if you have this basic idea of color theory and the basic idea of what good compositions are always about creating good arguments, then you have a good idea about this circle exercise. The idea with the circle exercise is that you want to create something that has a lot of visual power, that has something that you call push and pull in painting. Let me get out, but also something that's also kind of meditative. One of my great inspirations in my artistic life is the artist Louise Bourgeois. In fact, when I used to teach at NYU, I would bring the students over to Louise Bourgeois' studio, usually on Easter, interestingly. They were in their senior year about to graduate. And Louise was amazing. It was sort of like visiting Giacometti in Paris in the 50s when he was still alive, because she was so much about the old world and surrealism and the great New York School of Art, as well as the contemporary world. And she had insomnia famously, and she would sit at her kitchen table while she was trying to go to sleep. And oftentimes she would do these circle drawings. And each one would sort of mean something to her. Like maybe she would do one ring would be her son, Jean-Louis, who doesn't visit her very much. And then maybe the next ring would be another son who's always there. And she would be thinking about each person in her life, each thing in her life, as she was making these meditative drawings that would, you know, hopefully help her go to sleep, but also have a lot of punch and power. The neat thing about Louise Bourgeois was, you know, the feminist said, oh, you're about feminism. And she would say, no, I'm not. You know, go away. The psychoanalyst would say, oh, you're all about psychoanalytic theory. And she was like, no, I'm not, go away. But all of them were right, because she was thinking these ideas, making aesthetic choices, both by impulse and because she was super smart as an artist. And then in the end, you have this image that has a lot of talismanic power that you can't quite put your finger on, but you can think for your own while you're looking at it. And, you know, obviously everybody's right, subjectively speaking, when you're looking at art. If you can look at it for a long time and think about it for a long time, it can be really, really powerful. So I'm going to stop annotating here and, okay. And I'm going to show you guys what we're going to do today. We're going to do this sort of circle. This is a circle drawing that I did, and it only took half an hour. And we're only going to spend a half an hour today doing something. But the idea is that you're going to do anything that you want. You start in the middle by doing a little dot. And you do concentric rings around it. If you don't like circles, you could do stars. You could do squares. You could do any kind of geometries that you want. But the idea here is to make it vibrate. Make it push and pull, or what I say to the students, make it go whoopee, whoopee, woo. So it goes in and it goes out. It's like, oh my gosh, you can't stop looking at it. It's vibrating, even though there's no batteries included, but somehow this thing has a lot of visual punch and power. The neat thing about these drawings is that people really enjoy them. You can, you know, I always think generosity is the spirit of art. You can give them to your friends. You can put them on your wall. And no matter what age you are, no matter what your experience, everything will be good. The neat thing about, so here I am, I'm putting in a little dot in the center with the watercolor. And then I was listening to the first George Harrison solo album while I was doing this. And so I like to play music that's really meaningful to me. And I'm going to take you through a little PowerPoint to talk about the history of circle painting as we go through this. But just to give you an idea, well, no, where's the, just to give you an idea, I want to show you, and this is just very instinctive. If you need help to make it vibrate, just look at your color wheel that you can Google and do the things that are opposite the side of the color that you've been using. But maybe you're just feeling good and you do analogous colors. Maybe you have a negative thought. And I kind of think that these are sort of like a Harry Potter pensieve. You know, every line is a little bit like a thought. You're draining it out of your mind, pouring it on your paper, and getting it out. Picasso would say you go to the Fontainebleau, the gardens in Paris, and you get overwhelmed with a green feeling, and you paint to unload yourself with that green. But here you could, you know, paint or draw to unload yourself of any particular feeling or idea, and as you put it down, hopefully it leaves your brain, so you don't have to think about it so much anymore, and you feel good about it. At the same time, you're making a really neat dynamic image. And so again, there are no rules here. Different textures, any kind of visual arguments that you make. If you have a lot of bright colors, maybe try some dull colors. If you have just smooth textures, maybe you try some more rough textures. And you can make this drawing go all the way out to the perimeter of the page. And, you know, please go ahead and get started. And I don't know if you guys have any questions, but really this is very, very easy. And while you guys are drawing, I'll take you through sort of a PowerPoint, and hopefully that will be inspirational to you. But anyway, that's your final product, what you're going to be finishing for today. But do you guys have any questions? And unfortunately, I can't see hands, but is everybody okay getting started? Okay, so hopefully that's good. So this is Louise Bourgeois. As I mentioned, I taught fine art everywhere in New York, but I also taught comics at the School of Visual Arts, which really began as a comics and illustration school, one of the oldest in America and really the world. And when I started at SC, I was able to teach comics for the first time, along with painting and fine art. And a lot of my ideas come from comics, these ideas. And I started a visual narrative art minor that we currently have, I think, 26 students signed up for. That's growing and growing and growing. We have 4 classes that are in place for the fall, all sold out with students. The Lucas Museum of Narrative Art is opening up across the street. And I was really thinking like, oh my gosh, you know, comics are hopefully and illustrations art that's for everybody, helps me from getting hit by lightning as a fine artist, because comics are for the world, as in, you know, fine art's a little bit too rarefied. But hopefully, Joseph Campbell was right when he said that an artist's job is to tell stories for a culture to understand itself in order for that culture to progress. And I think that's true for any artist, whether you're a cartoonist or a fine artist or any kind of artist out in the world. And hopefully at USC, we teach people not only the nuts and bolts and the tools, but help them to help themselves find their voice in their art. And then once they have that voice, how do they bring it to the world? What is it going to say? How is it going to perform? How is it going to make the world a better place? Anyway, the circle is really a fundamental thing for us as human being animals to recognize other people, for feelings, synesthetic feeling, where you're looking at something and feeling something that makes you feel good. In Buddhism, they actually have a specific way to draw any of the Buddhas that's very, very symmetrical. And the idea with a Buddhist painting is that you're supposed to suture into the Buddha, mask into them, become like a Buddha or want to become like a Buddha, and be able to spread that harmony out into the world. And part of the design of the Buddha head is using this circle that's very, very simple. I grew up reading Scott McCloud's famous book, Understanding Comics, here in the bottom right-hand corner. And he talks about the power of the icon. When something's more subjectively rendered, it's other. It's somebody that you know, it's like your neighbor. But when something's super simple, like a smiley face, because it's so simple, it could be anybody and you could relate to it. Maybe you could relate to it because we love babies, you know, as we're wired to love babies, and babies are super cute and simple and have fat round faces. Maybe it's just because we have a very little idea of what we ourselves look like, but we know what everybody looks like who's not us. And so when we see a simple face, maybe it becomes us. And we also have the ability of human beings to place ourselves into other characters and transcend into them and experience their world. So if you're playing an RPG game online, you're doing this. If you're reading a comic that's really good, you're doing this. Walt Disney was a genius for recognizing other people's genius, and Ub Iwerks was the genius underneath Disney who created Mickey Mouse, as well as a lot of other characters. And this grew into, Bambi, where Bambi is sort of this primary subject that no matter what gender, no matter who you are as an anthropomorphized animal, we can relate to. Osamu Tezuka in Japan studied Bambi, studied Disney, and came up with his idea for Astro Boy and Kim of the White Lion, which begat all the great revolution in manga and anime that a lot of our students are really inspired by. And I grew up, with Charles Schulz and Peanuts, whose great revolution was to, in comics, was to make a minimalist design with a super simple characters and obviously Snoopy, an anthropomorphized dog that everybody could relate to. But the circle is all part of that. And my own circle paintings, and this is honestly part of the way that I self-taught myself how to use color, even though I had great art teachers. I thought about those ideas at Scott McCloud, and I really want to make images after doing a lot of very stylized, appropriate imagery that were really getting to the heart of the engine that really drove my work, visually as well as emotionally. And with this painting from a long time ago, but then it was at Knoedler, a very historic gallery in New York, I was trying to make faces. If we're always prone to seeing faces as a survival thing as humans, like maybe you would see these sort of iconic faces. And as you start looking for the faces in these circles, maybe it starts to vibrate. Maybe the different colors around it and the lines also help to create a push and a pull, but also like an emotive atmosphere. And I became actually very popular after doing very stylized renderings and drawings with these circle paintings way back in the mid-90s in New York. And I started using this as an idea for the students to make their own work. And the neat thing about these circle drawings, you guys, is that every circle drawing looks different. It's not like the kindergarten teacher who makes you draw a Thanksgiving turkey by using your fingers of your hand and then drawing everything prescribed and formulaic so all the kids' turkeys look exactly the same. The neat thing about this exercise with my students is that every time, like all the circle drawings look totally different from one another, and their inner personality comes out, their inner palette comes out, maybe the palette of their childhood, where there was a safe space where they were watching cartoons, and the palette of their cartoons comes out in the circle drawing. Based on their background, their taste, what they're looking at, instinctively, the colors are different, the circles look different. And I think that's important. We want to bring out the individuality of our artists and our voices. And I always think, this is kind of funny to tell the students, but artists are like cheese, like smelly cheese. Like maybe you love cheese, but you don't like Roquefort cheese, but you like Munster cheese. But all cheeses are different. They have a little bit of different smells, but they're all cheese. But hopefully this isn't too cheesy, but these circle drawings are kind of like this wonderful cheese store where every circle drawing is a little bit of a different kind of smelly cheese that's very distinctive and stylized to the artist. Again, these primary geometries are really ancient in ideas of human thought and aesthetics. This is one of my favorite paintings of all time, Singai Gibbon's The Universe from the Edo period in Japan. And the neat thing about this drawing is that it has everything in it. And it's so simple, but it's so great that if you think of, Cézanne was right that all the geometries of the circle, the square, and the triangle can be found in any element, in nature, in humankind, in our landscape, and everything's composed of these three different elements. Maybe he's on to something. And I think it's sometimes with these drawings that you guys are hopefully currently doing, you can be fast, but it's important to be focused. Analogy that the Dalai Lama has about this monk who made art is that a guy wanted to have a butterfly drawing made by some Zen Buddhist priest. And he gives him his yen and so on. And he waits years and years. And he's like, oh my gosh, where's my butterfly drawing? So he goes to the monk. He says, monk, I gave you my yen years ago for my butterfly drawing. Where is it? And the monk says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And he takes a deep breath and he goes, here's your butterfly drawing. And the client's like, wait a minute, I've been waiting for years. I gave you my yen for this butterfly drawing and you just did it in 2 minutes. He's like, yes, but, and then he opens up a closet behind him and all these butterfly drawings come out. It took me these many butterfly drawings to do this one. And so I think this is true with the circle drawing. I think it's true, obviously, with something like this, something that's so simple and yet so perfect and so geometric, and it has so much volume, it floats, it's amazing. This is actually at the Guggenheim Museum when I first saw it in a show about art that's also influenced the West. And it really inspired me, as well as, you know, Tonka paintings. You guys probably know all about mandalas. They're spiritual and ritual symbols in Asian cultures. I always think of them as kind of like a parcheesi board. Like you have a cosmology of everything that the Buddha in particular is about. And again, when you're praying to these, when you're chanting or whatever, you're supposed to sort of focus on the Buddha in the center, because they're made out of a circle, in a giant circle. You become one with them, you mask into them, Scott McCloud would say, just like a cartoon character. You enter into that world, into that cosmology, and it's supposed to give you peace of mind, as well as teach you really, you know, what the dynamics of life are about. In Western history, we see circles and these kinds of paradigms too. This is one of my favorite paintings by Fra Angelica. This is in Berlin. I've stood in front of this. I've done studies of this. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But the neat thing about Fra Angelica was that he was a monk and he really believed in what it is that he was doing. And yet a lot of this stuff is very abstract. When you see the Christ figure here, behind him is this strange God side that looks as abstract as any abstract painting that would be made today or even in the 50s, that I feel holds all the spiritual energy that's in this image. And he sort of puts a mask or a face on top of that transcendent, effervescent, sort of sublime idea of God. And it helps to give it kind of its power. Also, circles in religiosity, in Western art history, and Western European art history are very prevalent, especially when we're talking about sort of spiritual realms. This is at the Met, the creation of the world and the expulsion from paradise. And you guys probably know Dante, Michelangelo's favorite writer. And Dante, in his Divine Comedy, had the, heaven, hell, and purgatory, but they were all based on geometric circles that he had devised in his mind, that he creates in the narrative. They go deeper and deeper into different circles. And this is also depicted in art. And also kind of like if you extract that circle of Eden here from this painting, it looks like a great modern abstract painting. This is Botticelli's version of Dante's Map of Hell. That was commissioned by the Medicis, that also is all about sort of the circles going in closer and closer to the dark side of things. This is Doré, one of my favorite graphic artists, and this is his version of Paradise. Everybody knows the hell sequences of Dante, but the Paradise ones are also amazing too. And again, a conflation of circles, and here's seraph and angels. Also in Western European art history, circles are really big with the master painters. You'll see a lot of the old masters draw circles or paint circles in their paintings. And the idea here was kind of egomaniacal, that you would be a great artist if you could actually create a circle without an aid of a compass and make it perfect. And here Rembrandt's showing off his verve for doing this. But also like the Picasso quote, who says that when you make a circle without an aid of its compass, its imperfection is what's you about it, what's your style, what's your own spirit that's in the image, how it's not perfect. So don't worry about perfection here. Van Gogh, obviously very, very spiritual guy, wanted to become a priest, didn't work out, and so he put it all into his painting. But I think he was also really looking at circles, geometries, the vibrancy of life. The secret to me of the sublime is micromanaging to the macromanaged whole. If you look at a Da Vinci painting, like every leaf has been figured out for all the 60-40 golden ratio dynamics of the veins in the leaf to the other leaf of the same plant in a field of flowers that's in a whole landscape. Van Gogh, same thing, it's just a little bit more of pronounced color, where he's really looking at nature. And I always think that you could learn anything from looking at nature, and he's looking in the sort of the wicker-like weave of how all the elements in nature are put together to create a composite whole, and also for their hermetics of its own picture plane. All these colors and all these textures are all vibrating against one another and making you realize, like, oh my gosh, nature is alive, and make you re-experience nature in the same way that you when you were a little kid, where you were having a picnic in the park with your parents and everything seemed alive. The less known than the Starry Night at MoMA is the Starry Night over the Rhone, but also a similar idea. I loved his stars, that the stars were the sort of vibrant circles that really had a lot of power. Hevi Klimt from Switzerland. This is interesting. You know, she was sort of rediscovered recently. She had passed away a long time ago, but now as we're constantly wonderfully rewriting art history and being more pluralistic and recognizing everybody who is participating, especially including women and people of color and people from different regions of the world, Hevi Klimt has become really an icon of a great painter who begat abstraction. She might have been the first abstract painter in the Western world. And she was very spiritual. She actually did a lot of dealings with the occult and would have, back in the time where it was cool to do this, they would have seances and she had these angels that were talking to her. It's complicated, but she did this whole sequence of paintings that start out here with these dynamic circles that were very specific to her. And the entities that were talking to her told her how to paint this. And she did this whole body of work where this evolves into swans and so on. And then the angels told her that she would have a show in a museum that would be like a giant circle. And of course she had the show, this retrospective that turned everybody on at the Guggenheim. So it became true. So you never know. Sometimes if you make images about something that you want or something that's really meaningful, maybe it'll come into your life. Supposedly Kandinsky, heretofore before Hevi Klimt was recognized as the first abstract painter from Russia, actually was in shows with Hevi Klimt and seeing her work. And in fact, now it's acknowledged that he might have been inspired by Hevi Klimt to make his abstract paintings, which also start out with circles. Malevich in Russia also, you know, changed art for his time by making these simple, very geometric patterns that would also be installed in installations and weird corners and so on, but wanted to go minimalist, you know, get rid of all the human interaction, get to the most primary elements that interact with one another, to look at life that way and all the things that are constructed around life. In France, in the early 1900s, along with the advent of modernity, you also have the glimpse of abstraction. Robert and Sonia Delaunay, the husband and wife couple who made art, also did a lot of wonderful circle paintings that I think were kind of getting to the essence of nature and what the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists were trying to get in their work by essentializing it, which brings us a little bit into sort of a postmodern world with Picabia, who was also using ideas of diagrams and maps for his sort of whimsical, in-your-face, Dada-esque kind of like killing the beauty of art, but making things that were more analytical, also sometimes using circles. In America, in the early 20th century, of course, America since the beginning had indigenous peoples making all kinds of incredible work that we wonderfully recognize today as being super important, formal ideas and also aesthetic paintings, in addition to the ritualistic ideas that might have imbued them to start these works. At MoMA, at the very beginning of MoMA in the 20th century, they had a whole show of indigenous artists from America that really inspired a lot of the modernist painters in New York, especially Marston Hartley. Marston Hartley showed at Stieglitz's gallery in the early 1900s that promoted a lot of American modernity, and he was designated as the first abstract painter in America. He was gay back when it was very uncool to be gay. He was also in love with a German soldier when it was also very uncool during World War I to fall in love with a German soldier. And so he secretly made homages to him by doing these abstract paintings that were inspired by the indigenous painting of this time, as well as the modernist ideas that were happening in Europe, and synthesizing them to a new American vernacular form. Forrest Hayes, a very quirky artist who also showed at Stieglitz's gallery, was really smart, very interesting. He lived in a houseboat in Texas, and he thought he was intersexed, that he was both male and female, and actually performed some weird surgery on himself that I won't go into details, but he wrote criticism for the paper. He was in touch with Stieglitz. but he made these little shrines for himself, and everything was symbolically loaded for him. Like every element that he put in his paintings, like really, really, really meant something to him. And it was his ritualistic act to talk about ideas of gender, spirituality, by making his little images on his houseboat in Texas that he would frame himself. But he got to be even better known back in the 80s and the 90s, and very well known now. But the people that have these little tiny paintings by Forrest Best really treat them as shrines, just like any kind of icon painting from religious Western European art history. Jasper Johns, a lot of people obviously wonderfully recognize as being one of the great first postmodern artists in America specifically. And he's going to have a show at the Whitney coming up this fall. And one of his great inventions was really making intellectual art that was sort of, as a gay man, he was lovers with Robert Rauschenberg. And so I was sort of looking at the sort of Herculean macho-ness of the Abex artist and turning it on its heels. Here he's doing a painting, kind of like his flag paintings, where it's not a picture of a flag, the painting itself is a flag. It's a picture of a target, but the painting itself is a target. So it's recognizing its own objecthood by use of encaustic and newspaper, but also making a graphic symbol here totally green. Castelli saw this at the Jewish Museum when it was first exhibited, and then he was looking at Rauschenberg studio when he wanted to start his great famous gallery that started pop art. And Rauschenberg wanted to get ice for his drink, and they went down to his lover Jasper John's studio downstairs, and Castelli saw this painting in John's studio. He was like, "Oh my gosh, Rauschenberg, you're great, but John's, you're revolutionizing the world. I want to show you in my gallery." And this really started the whole ideas of pop art, but also a little bit more interesting. I think now, you know, we're in the 21st century, you could start looking at John's, not just for its own, you know, sort of steely objecthood and cool concept, but also as sort of autobiographical paintings. Like, it's really interesting. He has a target here, but these little doors open up to different molds that he made of his own body. As a gay man, maybe he felt like he was a target. I don't know. He would let other people talk about it. But another idea of a circle painting with an intellectual point of view, but that's also maybe biographical. Solowit, also sort of a minimalist artist coming from the Abex artist, you know, building onto ideas of minimalism, started doing conceptual works in the 60s based on his sculpture, based on his ideas. And the neat thing about these, kind of like the circle drawing that you're doing right now, is that anybody could do them. He would create a formula of an idea that like the one described here, and he would have assistants or whomever buys the art actually paint it on the wall following his formula. But again, kind of like the universe Buddhist painting that I showed you at the beginning, everything's here, but in a very abstract, fun way. Earthworks also celebrated ideas of circles. This is famously Richard Long. And I think this is sort of like Robert Smithson's spiral jetty, the idea of, you know, man trying to amalgamate nature and make it in its own way. Here, taking stones and marble and making them in the perfect geometries. Frank Stella following suit, you know, doing images that are onto themselves about their own ideas of form, you know, following maybe ideas of Joseph Albers and the minimalists, but also kind of with a little bit of a pop feeling. We all love JeanMichel Basquiat. And Basquiat obviously was super smart, knew a lot about art history and cultural history. And in particular, it's one of my favorite paintings. This is Now's the Time, based on his love and admiration for Charlie Parker, obviously in the image of a circle. But it's not just like a record on vinyl. It feels to me synesthetically a little bit like the spirit of Charlie Parker or whatever Basquiat was trying to get across. Felix Gonzalez Torres died too soon of AIDS back in the early 90s. But one of my favorite pieces by him, very influential even for my students currently, is this Perfect Lovers, where he just took these two clocks that keep time in unison right next to each other, just like a male-male or female-female queer relationship. And also in the time of AIDS, talking about time winding down, or, you know, recognizing in a sort of a memento mori the ideas of life and time. Ross Bleckner, during the same time, still very much alive, Ross, was also doing work surrounding ideas of all of his friends and community dying of AIDS. and looking at cathedrals and the way that domes were created to make this circle painting, which is made up of many, many different little circles in this sort of celestial dome, kind of, you know, thinking about the spirits of all these people going into their own cosmology. David Hammons, one of the greatest living artists of our time, a great sculptor, but also a painter and artist of all kinds, happens to be African-American and leader of the LA art movement in the 60s. These are conceptual works, and how they're created, these drawings, is that he actually bounces basketballs onto the paper. And in my mind, he must be thinking about Jasper Johns and how Jasper Johns was sort of turning AbX artists on their heads. He is an African-American politicized artist, is sort of turning a Jasper Johns on its head by making a circle drawing or circle painting from the basketball marks, and then putting the basketball they used to make those marks underneath the frame. And so it's undeniable how this image was made that brings out its socio-political content. This is Beatrice Masalas, who's a great South American artist who takes a lot of ideas from her culture, from the packaging, from the signage, from the buildings, from her home, and putting them together in dynamic ways that are abstract. And yet, because they're coming from all these different ideas from her culture that she's putting into her images, are also very, very loaded in terms of their own socio-political content. And yet here, to me, really reminds me of that circle painting of Dante's Eden from the Met, where there are all these sort of concentric circles that represent different cosmologies that are combined together in a multi-ethnic universe. Most of you guys probably know Yayoi Kusama, fantastic, wonderful artist from Japan, still very much alive, became very predominant in the 60s, actually, in America, and started exhibiting. She was a little quirky, a little weird being a woman, and also a woman of Asian descent in America. Even though she was tenacious and was able to get shows, wasn't acclaimed as much as the white men surrounding her, who actually took a lot of her ideas and made them their own. Luckily for us now, and for her, she's been re-recognized as the genius artist that she is. And you guys might know her infinity rooms, that there are lines outside the road to get into to see. But she started with these infinity net paintings that were paintings in and of themselves, but she's also very obsessed with dots. And what these dots are for her are, each dot represents like a different person in a whole world of people, kind of like Buddhists a little bit, that each one is its own individual, but then when you recognize that we're all individuals together in this world, hopefully you become less selfish and you want to give altruistically to other people in the world, to all, you know, come together and to progress and to make the world a better place, but also in her own sort of meditation. And this was actually an illustration for Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, an illustrated book that she did, trying to bring her work to the public. You know, maybe there's something there that's very, very personal for her. And she's thinking about her own ideas and her own thoughts, and she's putting each image down. So that is my slideshow. But I hope that you guys have been working on your own drawings while I've been talking, and hopefully this is helpful to you and inspiring. But I'm wondering if anybody's sort of near completion. We just have about 15 minutes left, and obviously this isn't a space necessarily for critique, but just like when we're showing all the students' drawings on the wall, their circle drawings, and they're totally different. Maybe some of you guys might want to share your drawings with us, and we can look at them and see what gives them their dynamicism, what makes them go whoopee whoopee woo, or push and pull, or do you guys have any volunteers? I can't really see raised hand. Okay, Dorothy. Dorothy, that's amazing. Let me pin you. Let's look at Dorothy's first. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, so that's really working well. That's exciting.
Thank you.
I love the different shapes are going on in that, and how it goes both back and forth. Everybody knows that warm colors come forward, cool colors go back in space optically. And that's really doing it, where you have that sort of sunburst pattern. It's really coming forward. The cool colors are really going back. But also the star-shaped patterns and the textures are also making it kind of wind away around and do its own thing. That'll be amazing. It's already amazing. When you finish, it'll be even more amazing.
This has been fun. Thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, and who else would like to show what they're doing? Let me look at the gallery. Okay, Susan Metro. Susan, oh, Jennifer, Susan, let's pin yours for a second. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So people do this too, where they do the different cosmologies of different circles. But I love how they're all interacting. It's a family of circles there. And they each have a different feeling. And you also have dynamicism between the groupings, like of those middle ones. They seem to be converging with like, they're like parent circles with like two little kid circles on either side. But that's really dynamic and interesting, full of feeling too. There's a lot of nice, all those purples and violets give me a nice cool feeling. Excellent job. Okay, let me remove this pin and who else would like to go? Okay, I see Jennifer and Clara. Jennifer, let's look at yours first. Oh, this is interesting. This is dynamic. You have to finish this, even though sometimes it's interesting to have these things in liminal space, so they're sort of like in their own like different world. But I love how that's twisting and twirling. It's not only coming out at me, and with that center, like having a real sort of heart and center of gravity, but spinning in different directions based on how you're doing all those forms, the different lines, the different textures. Totally exciting. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, and was it Clara who is next?
Kara?
Oh, yes. Yeah, who would like to go next? Oh, Kara. Yes, please, Kara. So let's pin you, Kara. Oh my gosh, so that's really good too. And do you see how all these are totally different? It's really amazing to me. Like this one has a totally different feeling. It's much more meditative. I feel like I'm like floating in the ocean with this one with all this cool images, cool colors around it, but with the dynamicism in the front, it feels like there's a lot going on there, kind of like a lot of ideas, and then it's sort of dispersing in a nice way into the wonderful watercolor. Excellent job, Kara. Thanks so much. Okay, who else would like to go? And I think
we have multi-generational artists here. Exactly what you expect. You meet Dr. Myra Pfeffer, your USC comrade.
Oh, very good.
Job, and meet our Dr. Myra's granddaughter, Coral. Look at us. We have 3 different generational work of art.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I love them all. They're all equally good. Yeah.
Lovely to be in your class.
We have an 80-year age range here.
That's awesome. Well, I love the play in the movie, The 60 Degrees of Separation. I don't know if you've ever seen the play or the movie, but
yeah, look at this. Bring yours up.
Oh my God, look at that. It's so dynamic, all the different things that are going on. But anyway, the father goes to pick up his kid who's like in kindergarten. They have all these wonderful art, all the arts all around the kindergarten. He says, oh my gosh, all children before the ages of 5 or 6 are Picassos and Matisses, right? And like, we learned so much from the kids because you guys are doing it from true integrity, from your own ideas, your own feelings. Like any famous artist is still drawing dragons like you were in your room when you were that age, right? And you're getting your yayas out, making your images. Maybe obviously you have the experience, you have your thoughts, your ideas and so on, but it's still that same drive. And kids have an innate talent that sometimes, unfortunately, they have bad art teachers, they don't get enough encouragement, whatever, and they stop doing art. But everybody, I think, is born with these wonderful skills. And it's all just about influencing them, supporting them, and helping them make great art. Oh my gosh, look at that. That is totally cool too.
So talk about integrity and children. She did this before we all started painting. This is being a child. I miss her world.
Wow.
Speckled cobra guarding at her eggs.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It reminds me of one of my favorite books is The Little Prince. And
that's exactly what we talked about. She's gonna read it right after.
I have it.
Yeah, you guys probably remember the pilot, the narrator, The Little Prince, when he was a little kid, makes this image that looks like a hat.
Yes.
And all the adults don't get it, but what it really is a cobra that swallowed an elephant.
That's right. Well, Coral did this before we all started. So thanks for bringing the child out of all of us, Professor.
Yeah, congratulations. That's fabulous. Yeah, we all learn from the kids, and I love art brutes and those kind of arts. We're always looking at children. And frankly, as professors at Roski, our students are so good, and it reminds us what art is really about. It's really about expressing yourself through the vehicle of your art, you know, really thinking your ideas. It's not about ka-ching, ka-ching. It's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not about fortune. It's not about trophies. It's about making work that's meaningful to you. We're always trying to make work that's meaningful. Oh my gosh, let me see that one too. That is fabulous. Totally different.
Wings.
A monster with wings.
I like that.
Isn't that
Excellent.
amazing? Story.
Big butt. It looks like it has one eye with a little smile. It's fun.
Yeah, see? It's magnificent.
Yeah. I have beetles like that flying around in my yard, I have to say. Who else would like to share their work? Any other takers? Well, you guys, hopefully this shows that anybody can make, oh my gosh, let's look at Kristen's. Hold on one second. Kristen, oh my God, look, that's super dynamic, super warm, right? Super hot, but you're using the white of the page itself as a color to kind of calm these vibrant colors, and also you're using more bright and saturated color versus more light color. So there's really good visual arguments going on here. It's really pulsating for me in terms of that ring. It really feels like it's going far, like to me, like optically, I feel like I'm going into a space, but it's also twisting and turning all around it. That's really amazing, actually. It's a really good one. You really can't go wrong with these. I really think, oh my gosh, Marta, let me look at yours. Hold on one second. Oh my gosh, let me see. Wow, and so totally different feeling. This one feels like a starburst. It's like really popping out at me. It's really vibrant and transcendent. This one, I get from the colors, I get sort of a tropical, but very nature kind of feel to me. Like, I feel like I'm also in Brazil or something with all these wonderful colors. But there's a lot of life force in this. I think the warmth of it really feels like it's like a beating heart or something. Beautiful, beautiful. And you know, you can tear that out of your sketchbook and then just trim off the binding of the side, and you can frame it. Yeah, I was. Let's see. Oh, Jeanette, let me see yours. Oh my gosh. And so this one honestly looks like a flower to me. And you know, when you're doing flower paintings, you realize that there's a whole universe in a flower, kind of like that sublime Da Vinci thing that I was talking about. But this one really actually exudes, like it's bursting forth, but with that green, with that coolness. And so it feels like quiet but strong, right? Because the cool colors are very meditative and nice, but then with those sharp lines coming out. This is, you know, a drawing that you wouldn't want to mess with, but it's very quietly kind of keeping its own space. And I also love that negative, you know, circles that you did around the sort of the petal-like formations, because that also is geometry versus nature. And even though nature has a lot of geometries in it, there's no straight lines in nature. And so here I get like humankind versus nature, nature versus humankind, and also just the feeling of like of a beautiful flower. Hopefully art is like great feng shui. Thanks so much, Jeanette. And you know, I think that people spend so much money on, you know, framing posters in their homes. If they only knew that any town, anywhere in the world usually has a really good art gallery with artists who are making things for the right reasons. University towns oftentimes have like a cool gallery, or also shows. Like, please come to Roski and see our shows in person this year. And maybe you would want to buy a work of art for the same amount of money that would cost to frame a movie poster, right? And if you have that work in your home, for me, the neat thing about being an artist is you get to trade with friends. And I have a lot of great artwork from my friends in my home, and they're really the feng shui of my universe. I look at that work and it gives me edification. It makes me feel good. It makes me think the thoughts that I want to think. And it's part of, you know, the personality of my world. In fact, my circle drawing that I made, you know, for this, when I initially presented this, I still keep at my desk, and I look at it every day for these Zoom calls, because it reminds me what's important with teaching, you know, to help students help themselves find their voice in their work, and hopefully be able to learn not just the nuts and bolts, but in the meditation of making an artwork, hopefully it's something that you want to do that makes you feel good and makes you think your thoughts. It's obviously much better than watching TV. even though you could do these kind of drawings when you are watching TV. And as an analytical meditation, you just think about the thoughts of your world, and you can have these drawings for your life and give them to friends, and obviously much better than store-bought work that you can give your friends too. Jean, I see that your hand is up.
There was one person who would like to share, so I'm just going to spotlight.
Yes, please. Hey, Mohammed, how are you? Oh my God. Wow, this is fantastic. So I'm doing a Venice at Sunset painting right now. I'm thinking a lot about Turner. And there's this great movie about Turner you can watch. There's also these Turner masterpieces that were built upon his scientific ideas, following the theories of weather and weather patterns. This to me reminds me of the sublime Turner painting. It's so turbulent and so intense. And yet you have that heart in the center of it that's like holding it all together. I love this. It's so good. I mean, in our crazy turbulent times, seriously, I love making art. If I didn't have art, I'd be running down the street, you know, screaming, tearing my hair out. Not really. Teaching helps. But for me, I'm always trying to get to my easel. I'm always trying to make art as much as I can, just because, again, it makes me feel good. Art's not necessarily therapy, but even conceptual artists are making art in a way that's ineffable, that you can't put words to. Postmodernism would say, oh, art's a language, painting is a language, it's not about meditation, it's work. You know, I have to say too, it's not a one-point meditation maybe in Buddhism where you're thinking about nothing or nirvana. It's analytical meditation where you're thinking about your thoughts as you're making your work. But kind of like when you're driving a car from a long distance road trip, and you find that all your thoughts that were troubling you sort of go by as the road goes by. I think when you're making art, it's much like driving or like skiing or any hand-eye motor activity where your engine is running, you're doing what you need to do in terms of making your art. But if you, as much as you can, not think about what you're doing. Like if you were dancing and thinking about how you're making your dance steps, you'd be a clumsy dancer. But if you kind of go with the flow, go with the music, you're a great dancer. Same with art, anything goes. There are no rules in art, especially now. You can make work that looks like anything, as long as it's meaningful to you. Hopefully it'll be meaningful to other people. And if it's not, who cares, because you got something out of it. And I'm hoping that, you know, in our teaching, even in this class, you're doing something that you could continue to do for the rest of your life and have fun. I realize that we're at the end of our time here. One thing I like to do, it's not a religious thing, it's kind of a camp thing, it's a kumbaya thing. But just for good energy, I have my students do this. If you guys could do this and bear with me a little bit. If you've seen Spirited Away, the great anime by Miyazaki, you would know what this is. They step on a worm or something and they have to go like this, and it releases any negative spirits into the ether. And so what I have my students do, you go like this, you go 1, 2, 3, kumbaya, and you clap. So if we could do this, so 1, 2, 3, say kumbaya, kumbaya, and then clap. Yay! So honestly, that makes me feel good. This has been a great way to break the new semester, seeing your fantastic art. And please, you guys, I'm so glad that you're friends with USC, that you work here, that you teach here, that you're a student here, that you're a friend of the university. Please come back to Roski. We're all going to be back in full. We're going to have art shows at the galleries in Roski, also at IFTs and new senior studios. We're going to have wonderful thesis shows there. And also downtown at Mateo. The graduate program is like booming. We have wonderful cohorts coming up, and we're going to have great shows. So it'll be great to see you guys in person. I'll be wearing masks at least for the fall until we get rid of this COVID thing. But please keep making art. Please know that what you do is good. Nobody can tell you anything differently. Think outside the box. If it's different and weird, it's good, because that's how you're inventing things. Okay, guys? All right, so wonderful to see you. If you have any questions for me, you can always email me. I want to do, for some reason my thing's on direct chat, but anyway, my email is my full name, keith.mayerson@usc.edu. Happy to talk to any of you. Please support our program, and so great to be with you today. Keep making art.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fabulous. You're getting all kinds of comments in the chat. And
keeps me going. I love it. I love teaching.
Absolutely fabulous. And we're going to send out a little mini evaluation, and people can give their comments there too, and also the link to your video. So
Okay,
It's all
yeah,
gonna-
thanks
all
very
gonna-
much. You can check out my work on my the Karma website. My own website will be up by Labor Day, I hope. And you know, ours about teaching and teaching as an art. Hopefully, we're all doing this at Roski and all over the university. I'm so proud to be here. So proud to be with you guys. Such an honor to be with you this morning. But I'll let you go because I realize we're 2 minutes over.
Thank you
So I'll
much.
hang on the call if you want to have any questions for me. But otherwise, peace out and keep making art, keep drawing, you guys.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.